Hello and welcome to Ms. Behavior, the podcast for college student conduct professionals. My name is Colette.
And my name is Kurt.
We're your hosts, and we are going to do some timely news response today.
Yes. So we were talking recently about an article by Emma Whitford in Inside Higher Education, and the title is Brown Professor Suspects Majority of His Class Used AI to Chat. Now, Colette, you and I have talked about this offline a little bit, but quick summary. Following the terrible mass shooting at Brown, this professor gave his students the opportunity to take home, I think it was a midterm exam, and immediately noticed that these students did exceptionally well on the midterm when historically, there was a nice bell-shaped curve of outcomes for students. A lot of these students were scoring in the 80s and 90%. I think that was the number. And he became suspicious of the fact that possibly they had used AI and cheated. So I think he shared his speculation with the students and then decided, since nobody fessed up, that he was going to use the final exam as sort of a challenge exam and said, we're going to do the final as an in-person exam. And if everybody does equally as well, I was wrong. But if you all tank, I'm going to assume that you did not do your own work on the midterm, and I'm going to declare the midterm null and void. And in response, a bunch of students just dropped the class.
Like 30, right? Like it was a
Yeah.
lot.
And then on top of that, the students who did take the final did not do well by and large. I think there was one student who did exceptionally well in the midterm and then also nearly aced the final as well. So, in the professor's mind, I think this just sort of proved that the students had cheated, and he was working with folks at Brown to, how do we address this? And this was the craziest thing for me. They're like, oh yeah, just, manually put in 50 incident reports on the situation, and we'll take care of it. We'll take it from there. So that's the big overview. I looked for an update to see if there was any kind of update on the article. I haven't seen anything. This is just from July 8th, though, so it's only been 9 days since it was published. But Colette, what were your thoughts as you're reading through this?
I have so many thoughts.
Me too, and it's about different aspects of this. So go.
Of course, I'm a student conduct person.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that immediately, there are lots of headlines to read in Inside Higher Ed each day, but his criticism of their student conduct response
Yeah.
caught my eye first. This is where I'd love to just talk to all of them and hear this
Did I
story
lose
not
you?
filtered through a reporter or him,
You
but
there?
did they really ask him to put in 50 incident reports? And I know some schools might, and they would just say, this is our process. But I just saw so many parts of this in general where the theme was lack of imagination.
Mm.
Could they have used AI somehow to help sort out each individual submission or somehow make it easier to deal with the huge quantity that the professor was dealing with?
Yeah, for me, immediately think how when I was doing student conduct work, how hard it was to get faculty to buy into what we did. And then to have a faculty member reach out and say, I just identified this huge mass cheating problem and I need your help in solving it. And to throw red tape at the problem, to me, it felt like it was not the right way to approach that. I don't know that I have a solution as to how I would handle it, but I mean, my first instinct is how do I work with the professor to address their concern and support them in what they have seemed to have uncovered.
Could we do this together as
Yeah.
partners?
Yeah.
I remember, like, our book club, the dissertation we read, there was a student in that study that talked about how he felt, I think his name was Daniel in the study, He said, I felt like my hearing officer treated me pretty fairly and the outcome seemed fair. But the professor in the class that reported me, whew, that was a totally different thing. They did not want to hear my side of the story. They were
Mm,
mean. They, it was really hard to go back to class and have to face him. And I don't know whether Professor Serrano from Brown is a bit of a curmudgeon. If the conduct folks had reached out and said, can we sit down together and go through all this information and find a pathway forward as partners, would he have been open to that? I hope so, but it's hard to tell because I read some of his quotes like, oh, he's pretty mean and he is looking for some retribution, but that might not be a fair characterization.
yeah. I just think about, I think I was probably Team Serrano in one regard because I think so many colleges right now are struggling with how to deal with artificial intelligence. What's the right way for students to use it? How do you
Mhm.
address it when they are possibly using it for not so great purposes? But the reality is that, AI has been, I think of myself as an early adopter. I think it was January 2024 when I started dabbling with it. So it's been 2.5 years. And if colleges and universities are still trying to figure out how to respond to things like plagiarism and using AI for cheating, then I can understand a professor's frustration and like, what do you mean you don't have this figured out?
And I think he said he was facing criticism from his peers who were like, you did what? You gave them a take-home exam these days? Come on, dum-dum. He was trying to be kind after the
Yes.
tragedy that their whole community had dealt with. And so there was some victim blaming in a way of like, well, how dare you give a take-home exam? I don't know how to wrap my head around that.
And I think about, am I remembering that the school that we work for had an honor code?
I I don't remember.
I don't know if they exist anymore. I think that, in my mind, this is a situation like here's a professor trying to do something nice and it's met with a mass cheating scandal
Mhm.
instead of like, hey, it was super chill that he's letting us do this. Let's do this the right way. But I also think, what is an appropriate institutional response to grades in general when something like this happens? Is this a situation where you just say, this was a tragedy for our entire campus? There may be good reason why these students thought, you know what, it's too much right now, but I don't want to fail. So I'm going to use AI. In which case, I would say, from an institutional standpoint, maybe we just say, we're not doing grades this semester. We're giving everybody a pass. And because of what happened, and then we're going to pick back up in the spring semester and go from there.
What I did not see in this, and now I've got it pulled up and wanted to scroll through to see if I'm wrong. I don't remember that they talked to any student.
I did not see any students in there as well. I think there was there commentary from people at other schools, if I'm remembering
I
correctly?
see they've quoted an organizational theorist. They got a pretty short, curt response from the conduct office, which is probably their MO.
We talked about in one of our recent podcasts about qualitative studies and student voices and understanding the student experience. To me, Emma, if you're listening, this would be a fascinating opportunity to ask if any students would talk to you off the record and just understand this. I mean, I would gobble that article up.
So copy paste that, and I would send that same request to my conduct colleagues at Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Could you
Yeah.
talk to some students off the record and just ask what was going on in that class?
Yeah.
There is research about why students cheat. One thing is when students say, if the professor is boring and they just dial it in all semester, I'm just going to dial it in when I do my homework and my
Hmm.
exams. And the professor didn't earn my respect enough to not cheat, which sounds horrible, but if that's the reality we're living with, okay, that's our starting place now to start growing as a community.
For me, the reality is that we really, as a profession, have to get our ducks in a row about what we are and are not using AI for and how we talk to students about when it is and is not appropriate to use it. I don't think it's realistic to tell them that they can't use it. They're going to use it at work, but it's in my mind a form of information literacy. Like, how do you verify that what you're getting is accurate? How do you use AI to generate your own work product and make it better? What is plagiarism in the world of AI and what is not?
I'm noticing that after the midterm, when he was trying to reset, he didn't talk to students. He sent them a message
Mm,
about his concerns about the cheating. And he told them, it says, in a message to students after the midterm, he told them that he suspected many of them of using AI to cheat. And with the blessing of the dean, he was going to have an in-person exam. So did he actually talk to anyone face to face? Or, we're so critical of students. Like, well, did you talk to your roommate or did you just text message them?
yeah.
And we model the same kind of behavior. But again, I don't know. Did he email them and then talk to them the next day in class, or?
Or vice versa. Yeah. I mean, in my mind, I guess I thought maybe he had the discussion with the students that were in class and then followed it up with an email and said, here's for those of you who weren't there, but more reporting needed.
Mhm. I'm thinking of like takeaways, like what can we learn from this for our own campuses? This feels like an opportunity to engage with every campus has a different version of like faculty support center, faculty development center, teaching and learning center, whatever it's actually the place I'm at now, they have two different places, but these are centers where faculty learn how to be good teachers.
Yeah.
Having a relationship between the conduct office and the faculty development center is really important because I think there are lessons for everyone to learn in this. And they'll always say that the faculty that use their center are the ones that don't need it.
Little preaching to the choir situation.
I always thought that they were a bridge between like
Yeah.
faculty and administration, that they understood both sides and in some ways were a mediating presence.
I think one of my takeaways was around, how do I say this? I remember a case when I was a conduct officer that sort of stress test our system. You know, we had an alphabet system for assigning case numbers within a case. It went A to Z, and I had 30 students. So it was a stress test. Like, what do we do when something goes outside of the norm? And in this case, in a mass cheating scandal, I don't think it sounds like they're trying to apply the system that they would use for day-to-day incident reporting system, and it's not scalable in a reasonable way for the professor in this case. And then I worry about, how are you going to meet with all those students? Like, what does that look like? So I think that for me, a takeaway from this is when you encounter cases that stress test your system and you find that it does not work, how do you start to develop meaningful workarounds so that the next time something like this happens, if it does happen, you're not once again trying to cram something into, a round peg into a square hole.
What I fear is either nothing, that they'll say like, well, we could bring each individual student in and they'll each deny it.
Yeah.
And we don't have the capacity to do 80 hearings right now because this is just one class. We've got all these other classes also with their cheating cases.
So is the lesson then, if enough of us do it, the college or university can't hold us accountable? Like if we all do it?
Or that you punish everybody, because that's the other thing is like, well, we'll just send a warning to everybody, or we're just going to put everybody on probation. And I think that there are creative ways. Now, I'm just thinking out loud, so this would all need to be critiqued. But for the students where there is pretty good evidence to say, here's what we're thinking, everyone's going to get a warning in this category. If you accept the warning, and here are some resources trying to address what happened. But if you'd like to meet someone, we sure would like to meet with you and see how we can support everyone, support you, support the professor, and see who comes forward.
I like that. It does make me think when we did the just desserts and dissertations, I think Dr. Aaron Kaplan mentioned looking at two different cases where a student drank too much and went to the hospital. They both went to the hospital, but when you start delving into what led them to that behavior, there were different stories that emerged.
Mhm.
So the other thing I think about with this is they probably all didn't decide to do this for the same reason.
Right.
And if you don't meet with these students and understand their reason why they decided to use AI on this midterm exam, then you're going to miss the whole point of it, which is understanding the student experience and figuring out how to offer the best support possible.
And I'd hope a really strong student code wouldn't be mired in we talked at the that discussion about sometimes the goal of consistency is
Yeah.
really strangling.
Yeah.
That a great code will say we may sometimes have to use creative ways of resolving cases, depending on exceptional circumstances, to give yourself that leeway. But like, who might be in that class? You might have the roommate of someone that had been murdered. You might
Right.
have a handful of international students that are still struggling with confidence in English. You might have somebody who's feeling desperate because they feel like this is the grade that might keep them out of med school. Somebody that's just used to cheating and has always gotten away with it and has forgotten their moral center. Every one of those, there should be a different outcome, customized.
I feel like a common theme recently in our podcast has been around this struggle between balancing compliance and flexibility. Because I don't know anything about Brown's conduct system, but when I read this approach, it very much to me spoke to like, well, we're gonna tackle this the same way we tackle everything, and it's an exceptional situation, and I think exceptional situations call for exceptional solutions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And maybe you're never going to find out in this class exactly what happened, but could you do enough information gathering
Hmm.
to help for the next time?
Yes, because there's always going to be a first time, and what you do with that first time is going to be it's going to be very telling about how you handle the second time. If you're going to treat this as business as usual, or you're going to say this is too much for a system to handle, then you're setting a precedent for how future students are going to approach this situation. Yeah. Hmm.
This is going to sound like plea bargaining. So, again, I'm just throwing this out there as a starting point of an improv activity. But
Yes, and
could you promise students nobody's getting suspended today?
hmm
We just really need you to help tell the story of what happened so we understand it, and we would welcome your partnership in that.
I think that's a really insightful approach to dealing with something that is relatively unprecedented. If you don't understand what led to the problem, and this is something that could potentially happen again, then the best thing in my mind that you can do is that deep dive.
Yeah.
Talk to students, figure out what led to this, what would have been a meaningful deterrent in this situation. I don't want to believe that we can't offer take home exams anymore, or that we can't count homework, or we can't count on students to do the right thing when we're not looking over their shoulders. It just feels a little parochial. Something's nagging at me about, why are students in college to begin with? I think my assumption is always to learn a skill. But when situations like this happen, I'm like, are some of these students just there for the credential that they graduate and they have this degree that is essentially a passport into the workplace? But if it doesn't have any knowledge tied to it, then what's the point? I don't know if I feel like I'm rambling.
Yeah,
It's
and everything you're reading right now about higher education is about return on investment.
yes. Yeah. It's it is sort of an existential question, I think, for higher education. If the purpose is just a piece of paper and you get to the workplace and you can't do the work, then it starts to erode confidence in what higher education is.
You
Uh,
remember, like, we used to design all our programming models around the institutional mission statement. Like, we are all here for a purpose. It's the same purpose that the faculty have. We are supporting the same learning
mhm.
goals. But I went to a conference with a philosopher a couple years ago, and on the airplane, I was like, "How do you talk about the institutional mission?" And he just looked at me like, Colette, he's like, "I'm ashamed to say it's never even come up in a conversation."
That's interesting because I feel like when I think about the work that we do, I'm always looking at the vision and not the mission. Because I think the mission is the what and the vision is the why. It is that 5 and 10 year outlook. Like what do we want to be? And the mission is like the why we exist. Maybe I'm thinking about this wrong.
Maybe we just need noble goals, is what I usually say.
Yeah. And maybe it's just different things vibe with different people. Like I think that a lot of people are attracted to an institution if the institution lives by its values. They're attracted to that because values say a lot about your workplace culture. I think for me and my personality type, I think about our college's vision as a community college is really about transforming our region and making sure that we are providing opportunities for economic prosperity for as many people as possible. That's what gets me to work every day. The mission may be what other people are attracted to, that here's what we do, here's how we do it.
So economic prosperity, that can be a noble goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do you get there? The mission of Franklin and Marshall was to develop students of intellect, creativity, and character.
Hmm.
And I do think those two things relate.
Yeah.
If you are intellectual and creative and dependable and honest and all the things that go along with integrity, you will go far. Of course, that math doesn't work equally for everyone, but let's just pretend. But if we only focus on the financial part, all the learning stuff you were talking about just goes out the window. But if we only talk about the learning part, somebody that's working 3 jobs and trying to do homework and send money home to their families because they're depending on their work study money to buy groceries at home. Oh, don't you want to be a thinker and a critical analyzer? Like, no, I'm just trying to get through this thing.
I do think that some people think of it as a barrier to a career instead of a pathway to a career.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have both worked with people who said it's just a piece of paper.
Well, we work with people with PhDs that I'm like, oh my God, that person does not understand our field, the least.
Right. And yeah. And
It was a hoop to jump through.
I think sometimes it can be whatever you make of it. I think I went into my master's thinking that it was a hoop to jump through, and it broke my brain in good ways. It changed how I think about the world. It changed how I write. And I think I went in thinking I knew what my doctoral was about, like what the program was going to do for me. And again, was surprised in a good way. It again changed how I approach the world. If a student is in a classroom and they're thinking that this is just something I have to do or it's in between me and working, then we failed that student, I think, in a profound way. If they're not walking away from their degree feeling like they have been transformed or they are in a better position to have a fulfilling career or to raise their family out of poverty, then yes, all the criticisms about higher education then are accurate.
I am scrolling through this article right now and see where they ended. The final paragraph is as colleges and universities grapple with AI, cheating must be taken seriously, Serrano said. We cannot afford to have a society in which a significant fraction of our best young minds think cheating is okay. That leads to a declining society, to a failed society. We cannot choose to become idiots.
Whew.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see an article in a few months called What Brown Learned and How They Changed, or how we all did.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm struggling with that last paragraph. I'm trying to put my finger on why. I think it paints the situation with a broad brush. I think you can you can cheat episodically and it's not a personality flaw or a lack of moral. Like, I think I'm going back to this was a unique moment in time at Brown that we've identified a symptom of something that happened, but we haven't really looked very closely at what was the student experience in this situation. Maybe
Mhm.
they did all cheat and maybe they are chronic cheaters. I doubt it. I want to believe that this was just an exceptional moment in time and it was stressful for the students who were there and that this is possibly a response to that and that there may have been 50 different reasons that 50 different students chose that path that for that midterm.
Mhm.
It's interesting to me, though, that so many of them just drop the class. Again, I work at a community college. If that many students drop a class, regardless of whether or not this cheating discussion's happening, it's going to be a red flag. People are going to say, what are we doing to support these students? What kind of conversations are we having? I want to know more about what happened behind the scenes in
Yeah.
this.
So my plea bargain idea, you
It's
don't even
brilliant
need to do that. You've got 30 students right now that there is no they're not in danger right now
because they
of
dropped
any.
out
Yeah,
of the, yeah, yeah.
who knows some of those 30 students, and could
Hmm.
they be diplomats in getting some intel about what was going on for them
Yeah.
in that class? I mean, you talk to students and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just sit in class. I see all my peers cheating around me." Like, well, tell me more about that. Who's somebody I could talk to that might help me be a better administrator by understanding their story? Oh man, wouldn't it be fun if we got to do an investigation about that?
It's
Mm.
interesting to me that also the general distribution of grades is between 65 and 80%. That's a rough class.
Mhm. But if you know it's a rough class and that 65 is okay, like
Yeah.
I just wanna get my 65 and know what I need to know.
I feel like if I was a smart student and I was going to cheat in that class, I would have aimed for a midterm score that was that was in the range and not like something that was like everybody just decided, well, everybody else is probably going to shoot for a an average score. I want something a little nicer than that if I'm going to cheat, you know.
I have had students, uh there was somebody last semester, she said that to me, she's like, "Listen, if I was gonna cheat, I would have gotten an A."
Also interesting to me, I am now rereading the beginning about the name of the class, Welfare Economics and Social Choice Theory.
Interesting.
Yes. I feel like I want to know what majors are taking this class also. Because I think well, no, I'm not even going to go down that path.
I'm trying to figure out who to attribute this quote to. The academic codes should speak to integrity, but also to the potential harms to student learning and personal growth.
Yeah. What are the students learning in this situation? I think partly it's going to be Brown's response. I think if the response is that we're not going to address it in a meaningful way, that it is if enough of us cheat, we can all get away with it. But also, is the appropriate response in a situation where you're faced with a consequence to just drop the class and pretend like it didn't happen? Those students potentially still cheated on an exam. And even if you drop the class, it doesn't mean that the academic dishonesty went away. It just means that you dropped the class and you avoided it. So, what did you learn in that situation? That when somebody holds you accountable, that you quit your job so you don't have to be responsible, or that you walk away from a problem instead of dealing with the consequences of it.
I bet you'd get 30 different answers. There was a consequence, I suppose, in you don't get that
Fine.
tuition money back for
Yep.
that
Yeah.
class that you dropped.
So
Maybe there was a lesson.
let me ask you this. At your school, if a student was reported for cheating on a midterm exam and they were reported to a conduct officer and they dropped the class before the meeting, does that absolve them of having to have a discussion with you? Like, is the discussion now moot because they dropped the class?
I'll just say I've worked at schools that had that built in that you could not drop the class
Interesting.
before it had been resolved. And then I worked at a place with I think the registrar owned the policy, but they had a policy that you couldn't drop it, period. But after some cases, we'd meet with the student and the professor's like, that student should have dropped the class weeks ago. And I encouraged them to, and they just kept
Mm,
plugging away. They thought they could dig themselves out of the hole. And now here we have this minor cheating case. And so we made it so that there could be an exception, like the dean of students' permission, they could drop the course after the hearing took place. And I would only do that with the professor's blessing. But I've also worked at places that didn't even address it.
hmm.
So I remember a student that they received an F in the course as a result of their cheating, and then they just dropped the class and that F disappeared.
That's interesting. I thought there was
Yeah.
I feel like there's a period of time after which, like, you can withdraw, but the grade stands. But maybe I'm so far removed from that world at this
Every
point.
school is its own school
Yeah.
with grades.
Hmm.
Well, I'd love to revisit this in a few months and just see. I thought about, like, should we invite Professor Serrano on our show?
Oh my.
I think it's a little too soon, probably, but I'd love to, in a few months, hear some reflections about it.
I'd love to hear from the Brown Office of Student Conduct too. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Or maybe we could invite the students on. We could have one of those Donahue moments where we blur out their faces, or
Oh my gosh.
that would be fascinating.
That would. Well, okay, wheels are turning. Kirk, thanks for bringing this as a topic. It's so sad that we've done 2 special episodes now, both related to Brown, and they're just they're dealing with all the same things that the rest of the country is, but in such a profound and under a microscope kind of
Yeah,
way.
it does feel that way.
Yeah, I feel for everybody involved in this case. All right.
Okay.
Want to close it
Well,
down? We thank everybody for tuning in for this, and we would love ideas or what your response was to what happened at Brown. You can send us a voicemail through the link in the show notes, or send us a Gmail at misbehaviorcollege@gmail.com, and we'd love to just get some more creative insights on this.
and if you send us a voicemail or an email, we might play it on the air or read it. So, be fancy.
Mm-hmm. We'd love to give you a spotlight. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time on Misbehavior. Misbehavior is written and produced by Colette Shaw and Kurt Doan. Theme music was written and performed by Kevin MacLeod from incompetech.com. You can contact Ms. Behavior at msbehaviorcollege@gmail.com. That's msbehaviorcollege@gmail.com.